from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Wednesday night edition of the program. Happy to be here with you. If you want to give us a call, the phone number is 833-482-5337, 833-4Valdez. And there's a bunch of things that I want to talk about tonight. Let me see, where do I begin? We got a Russian submarine in Cuba. We're going to get to that. Merrick Garland was held in contempt of Congress today. There was a party line vote on that. We'll discuss that as well. Let's see. The Atlanta police released the shooting video from 2022 of a guy named Nigel Collins. And that was an interesting one. Maybe I'll get into that for a second. And in New York, they've replaced the Regents exam. That's that exam that you have to pass in order to get out of high school. They're still going to give the exam, but it's not going to count anymore because they've come up with a profile. And as long as you meet this profile, then you're okay to get out of high school. This reminds me of how, Washington State changed the game on the bar exam, saying we're still going to offer the bar exam, but we're also going to add different options so that we can increase diversity, which I think is very insulting. You know, it's kind of like saying, look, we know that certain ethnic groups or races are not as intelligent or hardworking or studious or able as others, so we're going to make it easier for those groups to also achieve these results. And I think it's a false premise. Right? I think, for years we've seen attorneys from every stripe. I know I have. And in life, things don't always come that way, right? They don't always come easy to everybody. Some people can perform like Michael Jordan. Some can't. Some have to work really hard to be mediocre, and others, it comes easy and they're excellent. None of that really matters to me, right? Life is what it is. If you're short, maybe volleyball isn't for you. Maybe basketball isn't for you. Maybe boxing or something else is for you. It never ceases to amaze me how we just pigeonhole people based on whatever criteria they feel like, what they studied in school, how much money their parents make. Now, there are things that are real, right? There are real indicators. And honestly, I wasn't planning on talking about this, but it's just something that always is a pet peeve of mine. If parents went to college, your kids have a better shot at going to college. If parents have a decent income, if there's two parents in the home, all of these things are good indicators or predictors of how successful a child will be academically, professionally, and legally. Like not going to jail and stuff like that. All of those things matter, and to me, that's what matters most. Put money in people's pockets, help them to live a decent life. And they can go ahead and offer that decent life to their children and model it for them. But these crazy things that we see I don't say they piss me off, but more than anything, they're just so insulting. They're just very insulting to suggest that, people of a whatever, race, creed, color, whatever it is, religion, whatever, we shouldn't be endorsing any type of discrimination. Yet that's exactly what we see more of every day, whether it's diversity, equity, and inclusion in our government, in academia, or anywhere else. And that's unfortunately a shame. And the reverse of that is true. I was looking at the comments on this video that I saw of that legal case that I just mentioned to you. Let me see if it's anywhere around here. Do we have the audio of that shooting? Our report. All right. I'm going to play the report. Listen to this.
Didn't deserve it.
He didn't deserve it.
He did not deserve it.
Nigel Cullen's family holding back tears, describing the moment they first saw all of the footage from Atlanta police of the night an officer shot their son.
All I keep seeing in my head is his hands up, afraid, and running for his life.
In the video, you can see Cullen's at the bar of Fogo de Chao in Buckhead on May 18th of 2022, where he used to work. At one point, Cullen's grabs a bottle of liquor from the bar.
We have a guy in here with a gun, and he's acting very, very weird. He did not point the gun, but he is yelling at everybody.
26 minutes after the initial 911 call, officers responded. The video shows officers deploy a taser on Cullen's. He runs and grabs what police say is that gun. When a security guard tackles him, police say Cullen shot and wounded the guard. You can hear the moments. Police then open fire.
It's disgusting that they will sit and paint a picture that's still not true. A lot of the things in their initial narrative does not equate to what we saw.
Last month, the Collins family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the city, restaurant, and others for Nigel's death. His mother says he suffered from mental health issues and had a facility for him to get help, but transport they arranged for that night showed up too late.
All right, so that's the report. You heard it, and I think it was a pretty balanced one. A couple of things that are of note. If you've seen this video, it is tough to watch because, I mean, again, if you're empathetic, sometimes I know some people in life are very calloused and they watch things like that and they kind of forget that those are people in these things and not actors. It's not a movie. This guy, if I remember correctly, black guy, might have had like long hair, like dreads. He's sitting at a bar. Cop comes in and says, "Hey, what's up, bro? What's going on?" And there's a back and forth, an exchange. He's got his feet up on the bar stool next to him after he'd stolen a bottle of liquor from behind the bar, was asked to leave, and didn't want to leave. So he's there. They call the cops to get him out of there. They know he has a gun because they've seen it in his waistband. He's not threatening anybody, per se. He's just disorderly and doesn't want to leave. The cop tells him, "Hey, look, you got to go." He gets up. He starts kind of backpedaling. He falls down. And while he falls down, the cop starts screaming because he knows he has a gun. And then he unholsters his weapon and says, "Hey, look, put your hands up." He doesn't put his hands up. Instead, he does for a moment. He puts his hands up, and you could see he's scared. He's on the floor, and he's like got his leg up like he's going to try and kick the cop or kind of protecting himself. The cop's like, "Put your hands on your head." He doesn't do that. Instead, he rolls over like on his belly where you can't see his hands and you can't see the gun that's in his waistband. And when he comes back around, the other cop that's off of the body cam video that was shown hits him with a taser. And he's yelling, but it doesn't stop him. It slows him down. It doesn't stop him. He's trying to get away. And as he's trying to get away, a security guard tackles him. That security guard gets shot in the chest in that moment by the bad guy. Once he shoots the security guard, the first cop, I think, lets off 7 shots. The other one, I think, does the same thing. And finally, he lets go of the gun, and this like potted plant falls on top of him. And then, his body moves again, and a couple of more shots are fired. And that's it. Then they kick the gun out of his hand, and it's over. That's what I saw. And I might have to rewatch it in case, something I said was inaccurate. But that was what I saw. And do I think this could have been handled better? Yeah, I think he could have been a little more compliant. I think, lots of things could have happened. But this was real life. These cops went there to tell some guy to leave a bar. And the guy didn't leave the bar. And then they said, "Look, we know you have a gun. Just, don't do that." And he didn't do it. And the next thing you know, he shoots somebody in the restaurant. So they shoot him dead to neutralize the threat. Every time I hear of these parents, I hear the parents making this statement, and they're, it's a legitimate thing to grieve and to mourn the loss of your child. I'm never going to take that away from any parent. And I can understand how they feel and why they feel. I've never felt that way. I've never been through that, but I can only imagine. But I have to say, if the guy is having a mental health issue right? Because nobody should die because they were having a breakdown of some sorts. Why does this guy have a gun? Was it legal? Was it not legal? Right? These are the questions that we have to ask. Ultimately, this guy, I think, took everything into his own hands when he pulled out a gun, when he had cops telling him to stop. When he tried to run away from a cop with his gun drawn, who had just tased him. I don't know how he thought this was going to end, but it clearly didn't end well. Anyway, your thoughts on that, if you've seen the video. If you haven't, I may take a couple of calls on that before the top of the hour. So give me a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez here with you till 1 a.m. Eastern time. If you're listening on delay or all the way out on the West Coast or Hawaii, buenas tardes, good afternoon. Anyway, I want to bring your attention to this Russian submarine that is now in Cuba. Today, there was discussion on this in Congress. Congressman Andy Harris, who we've had on the program before, actually met him, nice guy, met him in Budapest, Hungary a couple of months ago. And he says that Russia has no business cooperating with Cuba. Listen to this.
The bottom line is that Cuba is an enemy. The bottom line is Cuba is an authoritarian state that puts political opponents in jail and takes its mechanism of government and tries to suppress opposition in many different ways. And the chairman knows exactly what I'm talking about because his heritage, like my heritage, is from people who fled communism. To believe that somehow you can go into a communist country and expect them to let you see the people who have a different opinion than the government is naive at best, dangerous at worst. I'm sure everybody knows if they go to China right now, they don't expect to hear what's really going on because they know the government, the authoritarian communist government there, carefully controls who you see and who you talk to so that you come back with the opinion that all is well in China, or in this case, that all is well in Cuba. That's all I have to say. This is a real threat. Cuba is a real threat. It's in our hemisphere. For 200 years, we've had the Monroe Doctrine. We have to enforce that doctrine. Russia has no business cooperating with Cuba in our hemisphere. That's what they're doing. We should pull out all stops to free Cuba.
That is, again, Congressman Andy Harris, Republican from Maryland, saying we should pull out all the stops to free Cuba. And this is all in response to a submarine from Russia that has made its way to Cuba, which again is, less than 100 miles away from one of my favorite places, southern Florida. And the United States has had a response. To discuss that response, I want to bring in retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. He's president of Project Sentinel and just one of my favorites on this program. Tony Shaffer, welcome back, sir.
Hey, Rich, always great to join you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. So tell us a little bit about the response. I was just seeing a report earlier about some warships being moved around. What can you tell us?
So there's a Russian naval fleet that's a group that's actually been deployed to the region. And what's significant is a modern frigate with Zircon missiles, which are hypersonic missiles, as well as a submarine, which has nuclear weapons on it. So this is clearly meant to be a provocation. There's no doubt that this is a Cold War move. And what's notable is obviously, their being near Cuba is I think clearly, I'm trying to think the right way to phrase this. The Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 was important in that during that period, the technology that we have today did not exist. Therefore, the nuclear missiles that they put there that was the focus of the Cuban Missile Crisis were the only way the Russians could hit us. Now, because of technology, these missiles, these frigates and the submarine actually have missiles which are far more effective, far more deadly, and there's no need really for them to be in Cuba. They could actually sit off literally, 10 miles off the coast of Florida or North Carolina or New York and just, fire missiles into the interior of the United States, nuclear missiles. We'd have no response time. So what this is, I think, significant, why it's most significant is that, these ships, these submarines have offensive weapons that would be used to defeat any anti-missile or anti-ballistic missile system we have. So it's really significant, and it's meant to have the effect it's having. This is clearly a provocation. It's meant to send a message.
Colonel, the last time that I saw Russia amassing troops and military might close to something, it was close to the border of Ukraine. And they hung out there for a while, and they hung out there for a while, and the next thing you know, they did what they did.
So I don't believe they're about to do something where they would attack something. This is meant to be symbolic. This is meant to respond to Joe Biden saying that U.S. weapons could be used to hit the interior of Russia. So this is their message saying, well, we could hit you pretty easy back. Just saying. That's what this is meant to say. So I don't believe this is them saying we're going to go on the offensive. This is them saying we don't appreciate Joe Biden. Secondly, Rich, who takes Joe Biden seriously? Come on. I mean, if you're going to actually do something to be provocative, Joe Biden's the guy to do it to, because you're going to see, let me go on the record here with you, Rich, we're going to see a completely feckless response from this White House. John Kirby will be up explaining away why what you and I are talking about, it's not really important. The Russians really aren't trying to send us a message. That sort of stupidity. And that's the stupidity, Rich, that gets us into wars. The Russians are sending a message. They're saying, we don't appreciate the fact that you may be escalating the war in Ukraine. And, oh, by the way, your language saying that, we can hit you with missiles. Well, we can hit you with missiles, too. So it's clearly they're talking in Cold War language, and we're responding with essentially baby talk, just saying.
Yeah, listen, and I get that, and I think the question that comes to me, and we only have about a minute left in this segment, but we'll come back and we could continue. But sure. The question that really comes to mind for me is, why would Putin write a check that he's not willing to cash? And I get it. He wants to flex a little bit, but this looks like it could be worse than just a threat.
Well, the Russians, that's a great point. So one of the things the Russians have said is that they will respond within certain circumstances. They've laid down some pretty clear red lines. And the West, especially the Biden administration, thinks they're bluffing. And I need to remind the audience and, everybody who doesn't understand this, the Russians almost went to war with us 3 separate times using nuclear weapons. 62, twice in the 80s, and I think there's been other times. So I think we have to recognize that they're not bluffing, but they're not trying to be aggressive. There's a very fine line, and again, that fine line is how we got through the Cold War.
I get it. Folks, we're on with retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, president of Project Sentinel. We're going to continue our discussion, discussing the safety and security of our country. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Mr. Call Screener, who is a budding radio star, by the way. Richie Valdez is terrific.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Our goal here is straightforward. We want to demonstrate that the U.S. supports the people of Ukraine, that we stand with them, and that we'll continue to help address their security needs, not just tomorrow, but out into the future.
That is the National Security Advisor at the White House, Jake Sullivan. He was aboard Air Force One, saying that the United States will sign a long-term security agreement with Ukraine and stands with Ukraine. And of course, it's that and the U.S. weapons and all of that that has the Russians kind of up in arms and in our backyard. So there's no hanging out in South Beach for me right now because obviously, Vlad's boys are off the coast there. Our guest, Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, president of Project Sentinel. And we left off with the notion that this is, in your opinion, and I respect it, a Cold War flex, right? They're just flexing on us, showing us that they're carrying some metal, don't start none, won't be none type of thing. But my thinking again is this could quickly become something else if we respond the wrong way. Do you agree?
I do. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. That's the issue. Again, they're speaking the language of the Cold War, and we're speaking baby talk. The language of the Cold War was something that was very important for people to understand, and it had to do with imagery, it had to do with speeches. I'm a Reagan guy. Rich, we've talked about this quite a bit. Mm-hmm. I was friends and mentors with a number of the Reagan folks, to include Bud McFarlane. And notably, during the Cold War, especially during the Reagan years, every word of every speech was precise use. As a matter of fact, when Reagan did his Mr. Gorbachev tear down this wall speech, people went nuts because that was a signal, and it was meant to do something, and it did. We don't have the people. Jake Sullivan literally has the brains of a high school debating team, and he doesn't seem to understand what he's trying to achieve. Nobody that I know is against the Ukrainian people, trying to support the Ukrainian people to resolve this. With that said, everything they keep doing seems to only increase the tensions and not actually resolve. They're not going to win. They can't win. They put people in charge who do not have the capacity to plan military operations and win. It is what it is. I'm speaking factually, and I think I have ample evidence to show that. So if you're not going to actually plan operations to win, give the Ukrainians what they need and the tactics to use it, then you got to do something else. Otherwise, you're wasting an entire generation of Ukrainian youth, and I don't think that's appropriate. So at this point, and I think this is what Trump is thinking, we need to find a way to open a dialogue like Reagan did from a position of strength because, again, Rich, nobody thinks Joe Biden's strong. So Joe Biden even himself said that they had no problem with Putin just taking a little bit of Ukraine. Part of the reason we're here is because of Joe Biden's stupidity. So I'm just telling you, it's not going to get any better under Joe Biden at this point.
Folks, we're on with retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, president of Project Sentinel. And, LT, the Colonel, the issue here for me is this is a repeating dialogue that we have. Yeah. Joe Biden, it's guaranteed, right? He's just never going to take action. The day he takes action, it's on an empty warehouse. It's on the wrong house. He gets the wrong guys. I mean, it's right. Just a horrible track record of push this guy around all you want because he doesn't know how to fight back. And right. And at least in my opinion, some people say he's playing dumb, he's complicit, maybe all of the above, but he's got 50 or 60 years of a track record of sucking at this. And he's just bad at it, in my opinion. Yeah. So right. We have 5 months left before he gets voted out, hoping, and then another couple of months until we can actually have a transition. And between now and then, I think the name of the game, at least for me as an American, I've got my fingers crossed. I'm hoping we don't end up in some other international conflict. I think the chances of us hearing something like something you just alluded to, and I want you to listen to this, it's reminiscent, and I was thinking the same thing, which is why we have it handy, of hearing something like Ronald Reagan speaking to Gorbachev or the anything like that coming from Biden are slim to none. Listen to this.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
It seems to me we are not going to have a moment where Biden rises to the occasion and, pulls up his Depends diapers and says, hey, look, we're going to do the right thing here.
Nobody, yeah, that's my point, Rich, is that nobody on the world stage, either on our side, our allies, or our adversaries, believe there's any strength behind Biden. The more he says inane things, he pretty much plagiarized the Reagan speech at Point du Hoc. took, verbatim almost that speech. And then what he left out, of course, the Jews. Ronald Reagan highlighted the fact that the Jews were rescued by the United States and our allies during World War II and saved. The Jews were left out of Biden's speech. I wouldn't know why. And the issue is credibility. And credibility is the watchword of deterrence. Deterrence were the key feature that helped stop Russian aggression during the Cold War, and ultimately the overmatch using military supremacy regarding manufacturing, regarding making sure the Russians understood they couldn't win. Heck, you've probably seen the movie The Hunt for Red October. You know, so. Rich, that was propaganda. The United States Navy went to Tom Clancy and gave him all the information to help him highlight what we could do to kick their butt. And so I'm just telling you, Reagan and the guys were playing 4D chess. Biden is lucky to be playing, hearts at this point, and the Russians aren't playing that game.
Folks, we're on with retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, a president of Project Sentinel, and the website, projectsentinel.com. And Colonel, I want you to stick with us. I want to get your take on these 8 terrorists that were now taken into custody, because, again, this is another threat to national security that is totally, squarely on the shoulders of Joe Biden. Folks, we're coming right back with Tony Shaffer. Don't move a muscle.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who, again, will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
8 individuals, all from the Central Asian country of Tajikistan, were arrested in Los Angeles, New York, and Philadelphia. They entered the United States this year and in 2023, crossing the Mexican border. They were vetted and allowed to remain in the country. CBS News has learned further investigation uncovered the men had possible ties to ISIS-K, the terror group which claimed responsibility for an attack at a Moscow concert hall that killed more than 140 people earlier this year. The FBI used a wiretap to track the men, and sources say what they discovered led authorities to quickly arrest them on immigration charges.
Typically, bringing individuals in on immigration-related charges is the quickest and easiest way to take individuals back into custody, but that does not rule out additional terrorism-related charges further down the road.
FBI Director Christopher Wray warned earlier this year of a heightened threat level with thousands of people crossing the southern border.
Our most immediate concern has been that individuals or small groups will draw some kind of twisted inspiration from the events in the Middle East to carry out attacks here at home.
So you've got the FBI fully aware that small groups, small armies, militias, if you will, groups of terrorists are coming right across the border. You've got the White House saying it's not a thing until last Tuesday when they said, okay, you know what, we're going to shut down the border at least to 5,000 a day, or 2,500 a day. And if it falls to 1,500, then we'll go back to the asylum claims. And we've got these guys that are seeking asylum, quote unquote, air quotes, who turn out to be affiliated with ISIS-K, and now they're all in the country. And this is the big story, that we've caught 8 bad guys. My question is, how many have we not detected? How many are here amongst us in sleeper cells? Tony Shaffer.
So there's thousands, and I'm not trying to scare people. I think if you look at the totality of all the people who we have allowed come in, and this is across the board, this isn't just ISIS. We're talking about Chinese, Russian, Iranian, the list of nations who want to get people in are significant. And because the border is open, because people can walk across. One of the groups is the Chinese, the military-age Chinese have stormed across. There's concerns about how many places they've ended up at that we just don't know. So I think it's significant that you saw this raid of this people being picked up. But again, my concern, Rich, is always, what are those, what about the ones we don't know about? What about those who come across and not even on the radar? And the purpose of those people being here are twofold. First, intelligence collection. There's a lot of things they can do, eyes on target. They can go look at things and report to whichever country or organization they're part of. And secondly, on call, like sleeper cells, they will do something. And I don't think the American people fully recognize how vulnerable we are across the board. We have a number of facilities which provide food. We have just-in-time logistics. We have power. We have power grids. Everything depends on power now. Our digital society depends on energy. And so I've actually talked to members of Congress and I've told them this, and I'm sincere, I could shut down Washington, D.C. with 20 guys with box cutters. I could completely shut the place down. And because we have not paid attention to who comes across the border, the next thing we have to do is start figuring out who's here and what they may do. And today's announcement of these arrests, I think, is a good indicator that there's more out there that they're not telling us about.
Do you think it's a good indicator that they know about who's out there and they're going to get to them?
I'm a member of law enforcement in Virginia. I'm Sheriff Dave Decatur's Homeland Security Advisor, and I do work with one of the networks. And no, Rich, they don't know. I think that what we do know is that there's a significant number of people that we don't know about. And that's where I've had conversations with three-letter agencies like, okay, this door's been open a long time, and we don't know who's here. So what do we do? How do we approach this? And I think there's some ideas on the table. There's certain patterns these guys follow. You have to have certain authorities to follow that pattern. I think with the correct attitude and the right authorities, we can start figuring it out. But I can tell you for a fact at this point, nobody in the Biden administration wants to give anybody authority to go looking at this in any great detail. I think this was almost accidental that they announced this today, because the Biden administration does not want any highlighting of their failure. And this is just another failure of theirs. So.
Unbelievable. Well, Tony Shaffer, tell me a little bit more about what you got going on. It's always a pleasure to speak with you. It's been a while since we've chatted.
Well,
and I want to know what's up your sleeve.
Well, one thing I would like to say, just for your audience to understand, one of my dearest friends in the world passed last night, Tony Lobianco. He was a member of the conservative movement. Yeah, no, it was he, as you know, probably was a great patriot. He did a lot to support veterans. He actually came out and did a live reading of his Just a Common Soldier for when I was the Grand Marshal of the first annual Veterans Parade last year in November. That was his last public appearance. Tony, as you know, was a star of The French Connection, did a bunch of other things. Anyway, he passed last night. There's going to be a full-page ad in tomorrow's New York daily paper.
The New York Post?
Yeah, the New York Post. And he, just wanted the audience to know that he was a great man, a great patriot. He actually worked behind the scenes to help us coordinate and try to help, understand what policies we need to keep the American people safe. So, I'll be spending some time. I think we're going to have an event for next week sometime. But Tony passed, and he was 87. Great life, well lived.
God bless him.
But God bless him. Yeah, he was a good guy. So.
Well, my condolences on his passing. It's always tough to hear about a patriot moving on, going to be with the Lord. But at 87, man, what a run, right? What a run. We should all
he had a great run. He had a great run. So.
Now, if people want to learn a little bit more about what's going on with Project Sentinel, the work that you're doing there, where do you recommend they go and check you out?
So just Project Sentinel. Go to projectsentinel.com and .net. You'll see some of the work we do. It's all focused on the Constitution, everything from legal issues relating to what we should be doing regarding taxation and all the things that relate to that, as well as national security. We examine things from the perspective of George Washington, and we think he had a pretty good idea of how we should navigate global ordeals and that sort of thing. So we focus on that. And obviously, I'm here with you, and I'm a Newsmax guy, so I use Newsmax stuff, and they'll be able to see what we're doing on a regular basis. So I always appreciate coming on with you, Rich, to talk about these things.
Absolutely. It's always a pleasure. Folks, make sure you check them out. And Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, let everybody know how they could follow the musings that you put out on social media.
Yeah, so I'm T-Spooky on the Twitter sphere, on X, whatever you want to call it. And as you know, I have some very interesting observations that tend to get people's attention, and people can follow me there and interact. I try to be active on my feed. So thank you for mentioning that.
My pleasure. I want everybody to be up to speed with what you're doing. You're always doing some good stuff. Thank you, sir. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I appreciate it. Hope to chat with you again soon.
Great. Hey, thank you, Rich. Always great to join you.
You bet. God bless. All right, folks, we continue with our conversation right after this. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. I didn't know that the circus was in town, but apparently one of our callers goes by the name Nobody from Nowhere. Now, obviously, this is a clown that doesn't have the balls to put their name or their face or, behind their opinion. I do. My name is Rich Valdez. I'm with you till 1 a.m. Eastern Time. I put my name on every opinion on this program. They're my opinions, not that of Westwood One, not that of the wonderful, blessed radio station that you're listening to this program on. They're mine. And that's Valdez with an S. And I'm happy to discuss anything with anybody, as long as you're man enough or woman enough to tell me your name, even if it's your fake radio name, right? I'm not going to ID you over the phone, but my name is Jack or, Pierre or Jose from East LA, whatever. Let's do it. But I'm not going to play your game of I'm anonymous, calling from anonymous to say Lord knows what stupidity. Anyway, let's go to Bill, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Hey, I was a little kid back in 61, 62. The Cuban Missile Crisis. Kennedy was the president. What Kennedy, I believe, did, I followed a little bit of it, was he told Khrushchev, turn the ships around or we will obliterate Cuba off of the earth. Okay. Am I a warmonger? No. But it worked then. If this administration had any guts, right now they're 90 miles south off of the Florida coast. I would warn them again. Now, if they don't turn around, I would shoot ballistic missiles over top of Cuba.
Listen, you got to do what you got to do if it's President Bill. If it were me, I would move our ships in there like we have and keep flexing. And I'm not going to flinch, right? I'm the wrong guy to play chicken with. And ultimately, I think that's what's happening here. We'll see how it turns out. Folks, we're coming right back. Hour number 2. Don't go anywhere. Rich Valdez.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media, your liberty-loving Latino amigo. Happy to be here with you guys. Let's see, what is it? Wednesday night. And if you want to join the convo, feel free. 833-482-5337-833-4-Valdez. And there's a couple of news items that we've been discussing. Of course, the big story that we were talking about earlier, there is a Russian submarine that is in Cuba along with a fleet of other boats. And the United States has dispatched some warships to go and check out what's going on and, also flex some of their muscle as that develops. If it develops, I'll keep you up to speed on that. Now, we also have the release of the police shooting from 2022 of a guy named Nigel Collins. And that was from the Atlanta Police Department. That was released earlier today. We talked about that a little bit. And we'll continue to have some conversation on that a little bit later. Then there's a federal judge that has blocked President Biden's pro-trans rewrite of Title IX regulations. And the other big story of the day is Merrick Garland, the Attorney General of the United States. There was a vote in Congress, and they voted to hold him in contempt of Congress. House Republicans voted today to hold Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress after he declined to turn over subpoenaed audio of President Biden's interview with special counsel Robert Hur.
On this vote, the yeas are 216, the nays are 207. The resolution is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
So that is a final vote of 216 to 207, which is a win for House Republicans after numerous members privately voiced some concern over backing the measure, leaving the Republican priority lingering for nearly a month. Finally, Republicans, with their razor-thin majority, were able to pull it off with only a couple of votes that came in as present. But they got it nonetheless. So, of course, there was a response to that from Speaker Johnson. Speaker Johnson weighed in. Listen to this.
We have to defend the Constitution. We have to defend the authority of Congress. We can't allow the Department of Justice, an executive branch agency, to hide information from Congress. We have important oversight responsibilities, and that is what is being pursued here.
So that's what's going on there. And again, this is for the audio that they've subpoenaed, and they've gotten a transcript of this interview, but they want the audio of the interview. And the White House has been stonewalling, saying, no, we're not giving you that. We're not going to give that up because we've already given you the transcript. And that's where this back and forth has started. I agree. I think, you can lose a lot of context with a transcript. And if there is audio, come on, I'm a radio guy. I always want to hear the audio. So I want to get reaction to that from our guest, Terry Schilling. He's president of the American Principles Project. You could check them out at AmericanPrinciplesProject.org. Terry Schilling, welcome back.
Rich, thank you so much for having me. It's been way too long, and I've been so excited to do this show. Thank you again so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's my pleasure, and I'm glad you're back. So when you hear what's going on, again, I'm always happy to hear somebody getting held in contempt if they've done something wrong. But, of course, when it's a Republican holding a Democrat in contempt, nothing really ever happens, right? You got Eric Holder. You've got so many. If it's Steve Bannon or the former White House trade advisor, Peter Navarro, all of a sudden, all bets are off. It's a criminal charge, and they're putting these guys in jail. What say you?
Well, I think there's two dynamics at play here that are bringing this. First is the weaponization of government by the Democrats. The Democrats are more than willing to overstep their bounds in authority and power and push the limits in order to secure more power for themselves. If it will benefit them electorally, if it will benefit them legally, if it will give them more power, they're willing to push the boundaries. And then on the other side of the aisle, you have Republicans who are afraid of their own shadow, who run from every fight almost, it seems like. I'm glad that the House did this, but it's not going to go anywhere, right? The Senate Republicans are really the problem. They're a major problem. Way too many of them are moderate. I would be willing to bet that if you had this vote in the Senate, you might get to 30 Republicans voting for it. But you would have an enormous group either voting, present or voting with the Democrats to protect Garland. And it's like these people don't know what time it is. We are on the verge of putting political prisoners. We're making political prisoners a thing in this country. It's insane. It's not American. It's something much different, something much darker, something much more evil.
Terry Schilling, I hear exactly what you're saying, and I am of the mind. I always have been. I tend to be fair, I think is the word I'm looking for. And I never want to do more than I need to do in respect to, if we don't have to have a fight, let's not have the fight. But I think there are certain non-negotiables in life and in Congress and in politics, love, war, etc., that you have to have. And once you've drawn your line in the sand on these things, you can't go back and you can't say, well, we're going to try and talk it out. There's certain things you can't talk out. And I think as a conference, they have to come to agreement on this. And so I think you're right. But when you're dealing with the Mitt Romneys of the world, the Mitch McConnells, and everybody else who people don't even know in Congress that are just like them, then, in the Senate, it becomes an issue. And I think that's part of the issue is they're like, look, we're part of this gang of 100 guys. And, in our majority, half of that. And if we do nothing, we can keep getting elected and still people won't know who we are. So it's almost like a win-win for them. And I think it's important that we put those guys under pressure so that they can do their job. Do you agree?
No, I completely agree. And listen, there's stuff that's in your and my control. But at the end of the day, there's a really wonderful thing about America in that these political movements that have ended up saving our nation several times before in the past, they kind of are unstoppable. But there's something mystical about it to where, you have this movement of patriots, and they're only 25% of the colonists, right? But they still end up waging this war and winning. And you had the same thing with the people that wanted to end slavery. You had the same thing going through the 20th century, advancing rights for women and civil rights for blacks and voting rights. We tend to make the right decision, right call, even when evil people are in power and doing everything they can to stop it. And so what I'll say is all these Republicans that are holding things up, that aren't wanting to fight, even to stick up for yourself. I mean, they're throwing our people in jail for trumped up charges and fake crimes. And we have a Merrick Garland, who's the Attorney General, who won't turn over audio of an actual interview that Joe Biden did. That's pretty damning. The transcripts are damning for him, and the outcome was damning. They came to the conclusion that he was so mentally incompetent that he's not fit to stand trial, that they could bring charges against him, but he can't remember anything. His mind is so far gone. That's relevant to electing the next president of the United States, right? We're getting ready to go into World War III here, and they're gonna let a demented person in there, someone that's suffering from serious mental decline, get reelected. That's insane. It's nuts.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that is pretty out of control. Folks, we're on with Terry Schilling, president of the American Principles Project. And Terry Schilling, I think this is the larger problem at hand, right? We hear over and over again that we have a two-tiered justice system, and it's justice for thee, but not for me. And we see that over and over and over again in so many different examples. Yesterday, I had alluded to how they're coming after Samuel Alito, the Supreme Court justice, for saying we should live in a God-fearing nation. It seems like there's just this attack that's been around forever, but they seem to be gaining traction because they've been at it for 100 years. And I think now that people are noticing, people that have been on the sidelines willfully, right, saying, I want to be on the sidelines. I don't want to be an activist. I want to go to work. I want to mind my business. I want to raise my kids and go on a vacation or two a year. I think those people are finally realizing it's kind of like a draft, right? And they're auto-drafting themselves, saying, I have to be part of this fight. I have to be part of this engagement, because if I don't get engaged now, we might lose our country and our children may not have a future. So do you think that the patriots that are waking up are enough and will wake up in time to make a difference?
I do. And the reason I think that is because this happened relatively recently. Sean Trendy, he is a writer for Real Clear Politics, has been following elections for quite some time. He wrote an amazing book called The Lost Majority, in which he essentially argued that what put Donald Trump over the finish line in 2016 against Hillary Clinton was essentially the Ross Perot vote. Right? And if you think about who Ross Perot, for those listeners that are my age or younger on your show, I'm a weird kid. I've been listening and paying attention to politics since I was just a kid. Ross Perot was a third-party candidate that ran against George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton. Yeah, he was a spoiler. And he ran on a very similar platform that Donald Trump ran on, which is protectionism, increasing tariffs, getting rid of these free trade agreements. And it was those people, when you analyze the election results in 2016, it was those people that showed up there. They typically don't vote because they think both parties are corrupt. They think both parties are evil or worthless. And I think what's going to happen in 2024 is exactly what happened in 2016 and kind of the opposite of what happened in 2020. I think the Ross Perot voters stayed home in 2020 because they were turned off by all the COVID nonsense and they didn't really have a good idea of what was of Trump being better. But now they see the weaponization of our entire federal government and our state and local governments, throwing people in jail for political reasons. I think these people are going to show up at the polls, and I think it's not even going to be close.
Yeah, I think they're pissed off, and I think they're showing up. I'm with you. Folks, we're on with Terry Schilling, president of the American Principles Project. And straight ahead, I want to get your take on how a federal court today blocked Joe Biden's plan to rewrite Title IX in favor of trans athletes. Folks, don't go anywhere. We're coming right back with Terry Schilling.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So it's Pride Month, and of course, that includes everybody who identifies as however they identify. And the folks that identify as female, that are male, biological males, and want to participate in women's sports have been given some protections by the Biden administration, and a court struck that down today. But it jogged my memory. It made me think of a clip that I heard today on Instagram. Now, Terry Schilling is our guest, president of the American Principles Project. And Terry, I was scrolling on Instagram, and I saw this video of something called the Queer and Fat Club. And somebody decided to troll them, skinny white kid, who says that he identifies as queer and fat, and he also identifies as 275 pounds, although he looks like he's probably about $110. Listen to this.
This is a queer fat club.
I'm queer and fat.
Okay, thank you for joining. We're just introducing ourselves at the moment.
Okay.
Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, Joe?
Yeah, my name's Joe. I go by he, they, and I identify as 275 pounds.
Okay.
I feel like Jay's kind of making fun of me, though. I know it's kind of a shock. I know, kind of a new thing.
I'm just,
Do what?
I said I apologize.
Oh, no, you're good.
Are you comfortable leaving the group at the moment?
Why?
I'm not understanding why you're joining the group.
This is the queer and fat group now?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I came here for.
Okay. And you said you identify as fat?
Yeah.
Okay. This is just for fat-bodied people.
Yeah, I understand. I identify as a fat-bodied person.
I'm not understanding where you're coming from.
Are you guys comfortable with me here? I mean, I'm pretty chill on my end.
I'm not comfortable, no.
There you go. He's using his reverse psychology on him. And I couldn't help but laugh at this. And this is what I feel is happening with Title IX. And Biden goes and tries to rewrite the rules, but the court weighs in. Terry Schilling, what are your thoughts?
The whole trans thing. I mean, I love that clip you just played. I had seen that. I think it's hilarious. First of all, I think it's hilarious that there is a queer and fat club. Like, why are we coming? I mean, who would want to be part of that club, right? Like, no, I would not want to be part of that club. I want to be part of. Yeah, exactly. And so, the whole concept is preposterous. But the whole transgender movement, the whole transgender industry, is essentially the emperor's new clothes. Everyone that's paying attention, everyone that comes across it, knows what's really happening. We all know the truth, but we're all too afraid to offend anyone. We're all too afraid of the consequences of getting canceled and losing our job and opposing the stuff and being, a bad guy. It's just time to call BS. And I love these guys guys that like that do that. It's so subversive, but in the best possible way, because you're exposing and you're ridiculing the ridiculous, right? And we need to start ridiculing the ridiculous. We need to get back to calling balls and strikes. Stop lying, right? Like we're lying. When we tell people, when we use the wrong pronouns, when we, call a man a her or a she, we are lying. Even if it's nice, we're lying. And it doesn't matter what your intentions are, you're spreading lies and deceit. And we need to stop doing it because it makes you a bad person. You start then telling more and more lies and you're less and less honest, and it becomes less and less honest with yourself and with others, and you embrace this comfortable lifestyle. But I'm really happy though, Rich, to see that ruling coming out of Texas in that federal court. Because it seems like the judges and the justice system are starting to see through this and starting to say the emperor has no clothes. The men are really men. They're not women.
Yeah, Terry Schilling, I think you're spot on there. And I love what you said. Everything you said, I think was both heartfelt and accurate. And I think you're not alone. I think there's a lot of people that also agree with that sentiment, and not just on this topic, but on many, whether it's the lawfare, whether it's the two-tier justice, whether it's this. And you're seeing states like Virginia and other swing states that are starting to shift towards Republicans. And I think this is a good thing, maybe not so early because we still have the whole summer, but a good thing nonetheless. Your thoughts?
I think it's great. I just want to encourage all your listeners, speak out about this stuff. Don't go along with the pronoun garbage. It's stupid. First of all, the pronoun stuff, right? These are third person pronouns. It's not second. Everyone has the same second person pronouns. It's you, your, right? When I'm talking to you, I'm not saying he, him. Right? It's preposterous. These people are trying to monitor how you talk about them when they're not even around. Right. So anyway, I'm sorry for that rant, but water's warm, guys. Rich and I have been talking about this stuff for quite some time. We've been calling spades, and the water's warm. You got nothing to be afraid of. Nothing bad's going to happen. You'll have a huge movement now. It's changed, but it's all moving in the right direction. I think that the American people are seeing all of this.
Folks, check them out at Schilling 1776 and at AmericanPrinciplesProject.org. Terry Schilling, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks, Rich.
You bet. All right, folks, we continue with our conversation coming up. I want to talk about polls. We're going to talk about lots of different polls, and we're going to do that with one of President Trump's pollsters. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez here with you till 1 a.m. Eastern Time. And just a reminder, Open Phone America starts at the top of the next hour. The phone number, if you want to join this late night national town hall conversation, 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. Now, I want to bring in our next guest, and I want him to hear this clip. This is a clip of audio from one of my least favorite television anchors, Rachel Maddow. And, of course, she's trying to draw juxtaposition, I guess, between the initial reaction to President Trump being found guilty and the polls that came out and how she feels, and she's alluding to she thinks it's going to change, and then the numbers don't quite bear out. Listen to Rachel Maddow.
This is the new NPR PBS Marist poll, again, released today, but before the verdict. Most voters said a conviction in the hush money trial wouldn't affect their vote, 67% saying it would make no difference. Among overall voters, a conviction might actually benefit Trump by 15 points, mostly among Republicans. The percentage of Republican voters who said they would be less likely to vote for Trump if he got convicted in the hush money trial was down to 10%. Put all those things together, NPR's own headline here is probably instructive. They say, quote, Trump verdict would likely move only a small number of votes, poll finds. But if recent elections, of course, are any indication, a small number of votes is, in a few key places, that's all you need to change the outcome.
Well, Rachel Maddow, I don't know if you're onto something there. I think you might be off by a mile here. But I want to go to one of the pros, and that, of course, is John McLaughlin. He's CEO and partner at McLaughlin Associates. He is a Trump 2024 campaign pollster. John McLaughlin, welcome back, sir.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. So you listened to Rachel Maddow, and that was, again, an older clip of her, in my opinion, putting her foot in her mouth. What do you think?
Yeah. She's wrong. I mean, they're devastated because last year this was about trying to indict Trump to stop him from being president because Donald Trump, inflation kicked back in and hit record levels again, and Biden surrendered Afghanistan. Donald Trump's been leading Joe Biden in the national popular vote for president. And last year, when I was speaking with President Trump and they were indicting him, Alvin Bragg and then Jack Smith and Fani Willis, all Biden allies, Biden supporters with ties to the Biden administration, definitely motivated by Biden. And you know, they indicted us 4 times, and Trump went up in the polls. And I said to the president, I said, you know, the only crime you've committed is that you're ahead in the polls. And in 2016 and 2020, we were never ahead in the national popular vote. We were close, but it was always going to be a, electoral college vote win based on wins in the battleground states. And that's how we won in 2016. And unfortunately, in 2020, we lost by 44,000 in 3 states, 11,000 in Georgia, Arizona, and 20,000 in Wisconsin. Otherwise, he would have been reelected. But now you're seeing all these national polls. In fact, since the conviction, there's, President Trump's leading Joe Biden in the polls, in the national polls, and among the latest polls where, when you're looking at the national polls, Trump's still ahead of Biden in the Real Clear Politics average, and most of the polls since there was a Rasmussen reports on May 30th. There was a Forbes Harris X poll. He was up 2. Rasmussen reports he was up 5. Emerson up 1. There's been a couple where I could account for Biden being ahead where they've underpolled Republicans, but in most of the polls we're ahead or we're tied at worst case. So Biden, the conviction strategy hasn't worked for them, and it's scary because I've said to President Trump, I think they're trying to make you the Nelson Mandela of America. And what I'm afraid of is if we stay ahead in the polls like we are, and we're winning in the battleground states, winning in the national polls, the reputable national polls, they may try to send him to jail. Biden's corrupt and he's desperate.
Well, that brings up this other one here from CBS, and it's within, I think, the last 7 days that this came out. CBS YouGov, 57% say the verdict is right. And, of course, MSNBC took that to town, saying that if nearly 60% of Americans think that the guilty verdict was right, that this obviously is a bad scenario for Trump. What say you?
Well, first of all, when you read the narrative of that CBS poll, which I believe still had Trump ahead. And
right.
That was the CBS poll where he's ahead by a point in the national popular vote. and you read the questions, you're like, okay, so they're kind of like they're restating things that they want to be affirmative, but in the meantime, they don't explain why Trump's ahead by a point in that poll. And then, I know they didn't ask questions like we asked in our last national poll that we published, which was done before the verdict, where 66% of all likely voters in the country said they thought the indictments and prosecutions of President Trump were political. 59% of all voters said that Biden played a role in these indictments of President Trump. And 53 to 33, the majority of voters said they were trying to put Trump in jail to stop him from being elected president again. And that's all on our website. That's on McLaughlinonline.com. We publish those results. We're transparent. It's a monthly survey we've been doing for years. And by the way, the voters, they want to decide the election, not the courts. When you ask them about who should decide the election, and they're telling you 54 to 36, the majority of voters want to decide this. In that poll that we did nationally, Trump was up 47-43. So there's voters beyond the votes that we have that are saying this is all political. Biden's playing a role in it. We want to decide the election, not the courts, not Biden rigging it up. And they think there's a double standard of justice the way they've gone after Trump 55 to 35. So CBS doesn't ask those questions. Yahoo News doesn't ask those questions. They're trying. There's a bias, and they're trying to. They're playing to their bias. They want, Joe Biden. I mean, but then on the other hand, you get people like Nate Silver, from 538.com, et cetera, where Nate, back in 2016, he's the one who coined the term Hillary lock, and I know he doesn't like me because I said Trump could win on election day, and by 78,000 votes out of 139 million, we were right. But it was a very close election, but there was no Hillary lock. Just like in 2020, there was no Biden blue wave. I mean, it's going to be a close election. But Joe Biden, what the key factor in the election is, in our last national poll, 68% of all voters said the country's on the wrong track. 61 to 34, they said the economy is getting worse, not better. 57% of all voters disapprove the job Joe Biden's doing. And there's plenty of other polls that have it worse for Biden. So what's going on is people are saying, when we ask them about inflation, which is the top issue by far, when they're saying, have you been negatively impacted by inflation, 85% say they have. 47% of all American voters are telling us that they've been negatively impacted by inflation, so much so they're having trouble affording basic necessities. So, you've got endless wars, you've got an open border. Biden, when he put out last week an executive order saying he was going to seal the border, and then everybody in America knows they're not sealing the border. Even his executive order would let in at least 2 million illegal immigrants a year. And, by the way, in our national poll, Trump is winning immigrant households 5-3 over Biden.
Well, I want to get into that a little bit more in depth, John McLaughlin. Stand by. I got to take a quick pause right here. Folks, we're coming right back with John McLaughlin, CEO of the McLaughlin and Associates. He's a pollster for President Trump, and we're going to discuss how Hispanics are affecting the election when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Yeah, I mean, look at this change in the vote, all right? This is the polls at this point among Hispanic voters nationally. At this point in 2020, Joe Biden had a very clear advantage, right? 59%, 32%. That's a 27-point lead. Look at this tremendous shift Oh, my goodness gracious. Now to 2024, Biden's dropped by 8 points, 51%. Trump is up 12 points to 44%. And you have what was a 27-point margin has been shrunk to 7. That margin has been shrunk by 20 points now versus this point 4 years ago. So it's no wonder that Donald Trump thinks he can play for the Hispanic vote. And it's no wonder that Joe Biden thinks he has to defend against Trump's advantage.
That is CNN data analyst Harry Enton. And I played that on June 10th. When he said it. I'm playing it again today because I believe that it's still just as important. And our guest is John McLaughlin, pollster for President Trump. John McLaughlin, when you hear that, makes sense, right?
Well, I mean, back in 2020, CNN was manufacturing polls that were lowballing the number of Republicans. They had us losing by 14, but they would have like 25, 26% Republicans. And the exit polls in 2020 said we were 36. So, I don't know why they were doing it, but they were underpolling Republicans, so they were underpolling Trump voters. However, what he's not wrong is where the numbers are today. And you've got, like in our last national poll, Trump is winning Hispanic voters 46-43 nationally. When you look back at the last two elections, we were like 32% in the last election among Hispanic voters. And now we're winning. Yeah. And so he's right about that flip. Plus, we're winning 21% of the African-American voters in my last national poll. And we got 8% in 16. We got 12% of the black vote in 2020. And now African-Americans are getting 21%. And what's the difference? The difference is the number one issue is inflation. They're upset about immigration. Legal citizens whether they're immigrated here as long as they came in legally, they're upset that other people are just walking across the border while they had to do paperwork and go through the hassle for 10, 15 years to make sure it was done right. Now people are walking over the border and they're getting free hotel rooms, free health care, whatever. Biden's, flying around the country. But then you also have, there's they're upset about crime. They're upset about the endless wars. You can't stop what's going on in Israel. You can't stop in Gaza. You can't stop the terrorism. You can't stop the war in Ukraine. I mean, Biden's a failed president, and he's desperate, and he's crooked. He's corrupt. And when you look at, what voters care about, they're not seeing any meaningful hope or change in their lives that Biden's capable of bringing about. So there is now a Biden 2020 voter who's voting for Donald Trump in 24. They're about 4 or 5% of the electorate, and those ones who have gone from Biden in 20 to Trump in 24, they're a quarter Hispanic, a quarter black. Their average age is 35 or younger, and so it's the old Obama coalition coming apart, and they're voting for Donald Trump. And There's still another 4 or 5% who's undecided that voted for Biden in 2020 that are available to us. So
now, John McLaughlin,
we're going after them.
I want to ask you a question along this same line here, which is with RFK Jr. There's an article out today, Washington Examiner, saying that he is pulling from Biden more than twice than Trump is amongst Latino voters. This seems like a good move for Trump either way. It's still Biden not getting a good amount of the vote. What say you?
Well, in our surveys, we're seeing that he's pulling more from Biden than Trump, but with all voters and Hispanics included. But there's still more to go. I mean, what most voters, the media portrays RFK Jr. as this maverick, and he's against vaccines and he was against the mandates. However, those of us who know him a little longer, like in New York State where he's active. I mean, he's crushed the energy industry in New York State where they can't frack upstate, but they can do it in Pennsylvania next year. Right. And he's been for big tax increases. He's soft on immigration. He's soft on crime. He's got all the typical liberal positions. And, so if he wants to take from Biden, that makes sense. As voters get to know him, he's not going to be there.
You know what I think he's done? I think he's singing a different tune. He was on this show on Monday, and he said that if he's elected, he would enact Trump policies to control the border. And I thought, well, why would people vote for you if they can get the real thing, right? But I mean, I didn't say that. I want to be polite, but that was my initial thought. And I think that that's probably why he's doing well with Hispanics, because I think people make the misconception. I don't know why they make that misconception, but they have this misconception that Hispanics favor illegal immigration, when I think that couldn't be further from the truth.
Right. And also, no, especially not, first of all, like, Hispanics are not monolithic, but if you came here legally and you're a citizen and you worked hard for it, you've just been diminished by these open border policies from Biden, where it's not just Hispanics coming into the country now. You got Chinese, you got people from North Africa, but the ones who are coming from, like Venezuelan gang members. I mean, they're beating up cops in New York City and Times Square, and they let them go. And you're from New York. And it's like, we know, when you look at it, when you look at RFK Jr., his whole family is on that RFK fund. It's a liberal fund. And they favor very liberal, immigration policies, including amnesty that encourages illegal immigration. His wife's on the advisory board. Obama's on the advisory board. Biden's on the advisory board. He's the only one missing from that group. And so his past is, he's been for amnesty. He's soft on immigration. He's not going to enact Trump
anybody
policy.
who's from New York has heard him on the radio. And I thank them for being on the radio, because honestly, I used to yell at the radio and argue with him when I used to hear him on the radio. And ultimately, I think it helped me want to get into talk radio at some point. So, John McLaughlin, stand by. They're telling me I got to take a quick pause right here. We're coming right back with John McLaughlin. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
What do you think this executive order, is that going to do anything?
Well, it only took him, 3 years and 7 months?
In a rare encounter, we meet a Border Patrol agent eager to vent. He asks us to mask his identity, worried he'll be fired for talking so openly.
Well, his job to get the crime, secure the border. We didn't have to babysit.
Does it frustrate you when you hear that, when you hear the narrative, like, why aren't Border Patrol doing anything? And
our hands are tied. If I don't allow them to cross and they call and complain, now I'm in trouble. I'm going to lose my job.
He blames the current administration, but isn't any more hopeful with the alternative.
I really don't like our two candidates.
That is a Border Patrol person undercover who is that Ross Perot, right? That spoiler candidate. And I want to get your take on this, John McLaughlin.
Well, I always thought that Kennedy was a Trojan horse, because he came out of the liberal Democrat circles, and those who know him in New York, he's got very liberal policies that he supported over the years. And, I just don't take him as credible as this maverick. So,
yeah, I hear you, brother. Let everybody know how they can find you and the work that you're doing.
McLaughlinonline.com is our website, and the poll numbers I referred to are on that website.
Outstanding. Brother, you're a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. And I want to thank you for being here tonight, John. Thanks.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, folks, Open Phone America is coming up right now. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
From the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the third hour of the program. If you want to join us, give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to, let me see, I want to start with a couple of things, but I'll give you a couple of headlines first. Obviously, the House voted today 208 to 207 to advance a measure holding Attorney General Merrick Garland in contempt of Congress. Then we have the information that we just talked a little bit about. Amongst Latino voters, RFK Jr. is pulling more than twice as many voters from Biden than Trump is. And that seems like a good spoiler candidate to me. Right. I took a little heat on Truth Social, inviting people, as I do every day on my social media accounts, to join us, to listen to the program live, to stream it live. If it's not on one of the affiliates where you are, then you can always just go to richvaldez.com and hit the play button, and you can hear it live, no matter where you are, through your computer, through your phone, through your tablet, and even if your car is hooked up to your phone, that way too. But anyway. Some of the heat I was taking was, people that were saying, why would I want to listen to RFK Jr. on your show? And why are you giving that guy any airtime? And I thought to myself, and, I got into a little bit of an argument with them or a discussion, explaining that I live to interview people from the other side, right? And I was very respectful of RFK Jr. And if I had a little more time, I think, we could have gotten to more issues. Like I really would have loved to hear his position on the Second Amendment. And, if I try not to waste the time on something that I know that it's a hard disagreement, because then we're just going to argue and we're not going to get any more information out of him. And I wanted to kind of hear what he had to say on a lot of things. But his position on the environment, I think, is, probably similar to that of AOC. And that is something that I would have probably liked to at least have a little more discussion. So I think we left off with he would come back, and I'm looking forward to that. But my point is, we can't, or at least I can't, be the left. I just can't do it. I can't come on here and say I'm not going to interview people from the left, because as anybody who's listened to me, from my early days in New York City knows, I've been itching to interview AOC All Out Crazy, my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens. Why? Because why not have a discussion with somebody who's as controversial and twisted, in my opinion, or all out crazy, as I like to call her, as she? That's a perfect person to interview, to give a juxtaposition of things and ask the tough questions and get really, more than anything, it's not about gotcha and it's not about trying to stump them. It's really about just allowing them to say what they believe. Because ultimately, to me, that is the best indictment of their policies. When you, the listener, listens to them saying the crazy things that they say, live and uncut. Not a clip on the news, but them right here with me in your living room, in your car, in your office, in your job, wherever you are, hearing them say exactly what they mean. I think that's priceless. That's something that CNN rarely does. MSNBC never does. When was the last time you saw Rachel Maddow interview Donald Trump? Or me, or anybody else, honestly, who she disagrees with? Joy Reid. I don't see Joy Reid asking for interviews from Jason Miller, senior advisor to the Trump campaign, or anybody else, because they're not interested in allowing any other opinion than theirs. So, yeah, I'm always looking to invite people from the other side, and I'm going to be respectful so that they don't hang up and we actually can have a conversation. If I, try to play gotcha with them, like some of the crazy callers we get every now and again, then we're not going to get anywhere. We're going to have 2 or 3 minutes, and you can't have a long-form interview in 2 or 3 minutes. But my point is, we have to have that conversation, and we have to be different from the left. We have to provide contrast from the left. If we don't, then we're exactly what we don't want to be. And if there's anything we learned on today, right, the 12th of June, with the anniversary of President Ronald Reagan's address at the Brandenburg Gate at the Berlin Wall, it's that we have to stand up for what's right, right? We have to embrace liberty, not shut people up, not censor people, not starve the other side of airtime so that they don't get a chance. That's exactly what I stand against. I want you to hear what the left has to say so that I can tell you what I have to say and show you how starkly different it is. That's the beauty of what we do. Anyway, speaking of Reagan, I want you to hear that speech, with today being the anniversary of that speech. Go right ahead.
Behind me stands a wall that encircles the free sectors of this city, part of a vast system of barriers that divides the entire continent of Europe. General Secretary Gorbachev, if you seek peace, if you seek prosperity for the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, if you seek liberalization, come here to this gate. Mr. Gorbachev, open this gate.
Great communicator. Ronald Reagan.
Mr. Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
Absolutely one of the most famous speeches, at least of my lifetime. I remember hearing that as a kid and thinking, man, that was cool. This guy's cool. Plus he had hair. I had hair as a kid, but not hair like that. He had that Ricky Ricardo hair. It was just like a lot of hair. It was really slick. And I thought, Ronald Reagan's one smooth dude. Anyway, the bottom line here is if we don't stand up for liberty like Reagan did, if we don't entertain the crazy stories of the left and show the juxtaposition, people will start believing anything and everything. And there's one thing that I believe in is trying to be rational. I understand sometimes we're faced with irrationality, but when I start getting mail, email, text messages, inbox messages from social media, whatever it is, from people that are incredibly well-intentioned, but they're telling me things like, I don't even know where to begin. Ships are going to get stuck in port. They're not going to be able to unload their goods. Why? Well, I heard it on some website before it's news.com. I look at this website, almost everything on there is crazy that I saw. There's a ton of people out there that are happy to take advantage of good-hearted people that want to see things improve. I'm not here to do that. I'm here to hope for the best and in many ways expect the worst. Call me what you will. A curmudgeon, a jaded individual, no problem. I'll take it. All of the above. But one thing I'm not going to do is just go into this rabbit hole of fantasy land that I'm not saying it's not real. I'm just saying I can't prove it. And if I can't prove it, if I have to literally read the tea leaves on everything, then it's not even just conjecture, because it's my opinion, my speculation based on what? A whim? Especially when these things don't come to fruition. So I had to check in with some of the people today just for the sake of busting chops and say, hey, by the way, what happened with those ships that got stuck in port? Oh, yeah, nothing. Another one I got was keep your ears open. Today they're going to be announcing 62 bank failures. My first question was, who's they? Who's they that's doing this announcing? This was, again, on Sunday, so we were supposed to hear this on Monday. I look around, I look at the last, several years. I think since 2017, there's been 15 bank failures. So the announcement of 62 in one day would be shocking. Problem is, it didn't happen. Thank God it didn't happen. Now, I'm not saying that we're not going to see some bank failures, but if you go and make a prediction saying we're going to see 62 bank failures on Monday morning, and here we are going into Thursday, and nothing's happened, I think it's a good idea for you to say, you know what, maybe this silly website, this Before It's News, whatever it is, maybe I shouldn't go there. Maybe I should try to get my news from people that are a little more, seasoned than somebody who just got involved in observing politics after they voted for Obama twice and decided to get a microphone and a video camera and start posting things on this website or on Rumble or on YouTube. And again, no disrespect to anybody who's got a show on Rumble or YouTube. There's a lot of people getting a lot of views, making a lot of money. But it doesn't mean that what they're saying is right. And I'm not saying what I'm saying is right. I'm just saying what I'm saying I'm getting from sources that are in at least in some way legitimate or illegitimate, right? But I'll cite that illegitimate source as well and include my opinion. And I think that's just important. And it's not because I think I'm better than others. No. It's that I understand that people are going to use logic to come up with their educated guess on things. And if you come across as a crackpot and you're just like, I think this guy's this, and I think everybody's a clone, and I think everybody's going to be locked up in Guantanamo Bay, and we should do away with the Constitution just to get rid of the Democrats and pedophile elites and the globalists. Well, then what happens to the rule of law that we're supposed to be sticking up for? What happens to the liberty that we have? What happens to me complaining about Trump not having due process, and then I expect Trump to go after Biden and not offer him that same due process? What kind of hypocrite would I be? So, of course, I'm going to let the liberals on. Of course, I'm going to let the leftists on. If they're willing to come on the show, I'm happy to have them. Anyway, your calls and more are coming up straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
The fastest growing transnational criminal organization known as the Tren de Aragua is a Venezuelan gang that has now infiltrated its way into the United States through various sectors of the U.S.-Mexico border.
That here in El Paso, Tren de Aragua gang members who are identified are put into prosecution pathways for 1325 illegal entry into the United States.
According to a CNN report from Border Patrol, 38 suspected members from the Tren de Aragua have been arrested between 2022 and 2023.
When they come to a new place, they do it oftentimes through immigrant pathways, taking advantage of people from within their own community.
Tren de Aragua is taking advantage of the mass Venezuelan exodus to make their way into the country, and now they are ramping up crime in U.S. cities like Miami and Chicago.
That is a report from March 14th, and today, June 12th, the report continues. Violent El Tren de Aragua Venezuelan gang is now linked to over 100 criminal cases in the United States. Federal authorities have opened more than 100 investigations into crimes allegedly committed by the members of this violent Venezuelan gang, again named El Tren de Aragua, according to a report by NBC News. The transnational criminal organization, whose name literally means in English, the Aragua Train, is a nod to its roots as a railway workers' union from that region, which has been flooding the U.S. with their members. Anyway, many of them have been here illegally, sliding in through the southern border, posing, you guessed it, as asylum seekers. Now, the members have infiltrated major cities across the country, including, this is in the New York Post, New York, Chicago, Miami, and Denver, where they engage in money laundering, theft, human trafficking, according to these reports. This group, lurking in the shadows, hard for authorities to pin down or identify because Venezuelan authorities refuse to help U.S. police with any data that they have on the group. Like, hey, that was our problem, now it's your problem, and no, we don't know anything. One of the main identifiers police use for the gang is their tattoos, particular to their members, including a 5-pointed crown, an AK-47 rifle, an actual train, various stars, gas masks, and grenades are all popular tattoos that their members wear. However, many of these tattoos are popular designs throughout South America, so it doesn't automatically mean they're in a gang. Incidents which have recently attributed to gang activity focus on a 19-year-old immigrant that was recently charged with shooting 2 NYPD cops on June 3rd. His name, Bernardo Raul Castro Mata, allegedly told police that he was recruited by El Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang, by their New York City coordinator to join a crew of snatch and grab criminals that law enforcement now says is out there doing what they do. Mr. Mata is illegally in the U.S., lying, saying he was seeking asylum. He entered through Texas last July, 11 months ago, and has been encouraged to get more gang tattoos to show his allegiance, according to sources interviewed by the New York Post. So that's the story there. And I want to get your thoughts on this immigration stuff. Of course, this comes on the heels of the 8 ISIS-K linked terrorists being found in the country and taken into custody. And of course, the White House is mum on that stuff. So let me see. I want to get to your calls. I've been doing all the talking, and it's definitely your turn. Let's see. Who do we have here? We've got calls from Pennsylvania, Chicago, West Virginia, Pennsylvania again, Idaho. And let's see. Where are we going here? My screen is freezing up a little bit, but let's go with Helen.
Hello.
Hi. Rapid City, South Dakota, KOTA. Go right ahead.
Yes. In the early mid-'60s, I met a young airman at the air base out that's in our town, and he was deployed to England. And this was during the Cuban crisis. This was 1962. And then he came back to the States. We got married in 63, and then I went back over with him. It was quite an interesting 2 years. In the cellar of the old home we were living in, he had made accommodations for me because the B-52s would fly over our house. We lived in an old English house with no central heating. But anyway, if the B-52s came over...
Helen, hang on. The music is coming in. That means I have to take a pause. We're going to come right back to your call. And when we return, folks, the rest of your calls are coming up as well. Don't go anywhere. I am Rich Valdez, and we're coming right back. It's Open Phone America, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Helen, stick with me. Don't go anywhere. We're coming right back.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Let's show you something that you don't see. I've never seen ever in 12 years of living here. A Russian nuclear-powered submarine, obviously above water, entering the port of Havana, just 90 miles from the United States. You don't get much more potent symbolism than that. This is the largest convoy of Russian warships that has come here in many years, and certainly some of the most sophisticated weaponry that Vladimir Putin has deployed to Cuba in many, many years. We should point out, Cuban officials say there are no nuclear warheads aboard these ships, that they are coming here for peaceful means. U.S. officials have said they do not pose a direct threat to the United States, but they're keeping a very close eye on them, as you would expect. They were shadowed along the coast of Florida over the last several days as they approached the port of Havana.
That is Patrick Oppman with CNN, and that is the big story of the day. The Russian submarine that has nuclear capability has arrived in Cuba with, other ships in tow. It's a small fleet, and our own fleet is shadowing them and babysitting, if you will. And these are the thumping of one's chest between Vladimir Putin and Joe Biden. And if I had to put my money on who's the better chest thumper, I'm going to probably have to go with Vlad. And we know I don't like Vlad. But that seems to be the case here, according to the analysis we got earlier from retired Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer. And I want to get your thoughts on this ship, on this posturing from Russia, and everything else that we've got. So stick with me, folks. We're coming back. Helen in Rapid City, South Dakota, KOTA. Helen, go right ahead.
Yes, I think that people are sleeping under the covers too closely tonight to think that Putin's not going to do anything. He didn't come here to play checkers. He came here to, to do business. But anyway, as far as my experience living in the first Cuban crisis in England, Steeple Acton, England, we were stationed at Royal Air Force Base, Upper Hayford. And my husband had fixed in the very low part of the home, because the home was about 200 years old, but had fixed a place in case the B-52s would fly en masse all over our house, because that they flew over our house to go down there, because that meant that they were going to war. So it was rather interesting. I acclimated myself very well. I enjoyed being over there. We were there for 2 years. We happened to go over there in the coldest winter of 99 years. But it was wonderful, except for having to worry if the B-52s would fly over one day, and we would never see each other again, because he'd be in one of those planes. But I hope, I don't know what I hope. I just hope he doesn't do anything rash, and maybe they'll go away like they did before, 1965, because it's really scary. It's quite scary indeed.
Well, Helen, I want to thank your husband for his service, and I want to thank you for being sweet and holding on. I appreciate your patience and your thoughtful comment. And I can't go under my covers tonight and hope that they'll go away. My hope would be that we have a president that is really going to put his foot down and not take anything from anybody, especially that close to striking distance of our country. The minute you allow that to happen, again, I've already seen what Vladimir Putin can do when he starts to amass a military presence close to the border of a country. We saw it in Ukraine, and look at where they are today. So Joe Biden has to be decisive here, and I'm not calling for a war, although I'm probably more of a warmonger than not. But I have to say, we have to do something. We can't just sit here and pretend nothing's going to happen, in my opinion. I could be wrong. Helen, thank you for the call, and let us continue. We're going to go to Bob, Charleston, West Virginia, WCHS. Bob, go right ahead.
Hey, I like your iron sharpens iron idea about talking to people of different ideologies. You get right down to the bone of things instead of reflecting and ping-ponging back and forth. I just wanted to make that first statement.
Thank you.
Yes, Mariel boat lift is how our enemies basically take all of their malcontents and they're bad guys, and they ship them over here. Remember that? Castro sent them over in 1980. And they're doing the same thing in Venezuela. Little Venice is sending over their bad guys, too. I was in Homestead.
They're emptying prisons.
Homestead Air Force Base.
Yep.
Sir?
I said they're emptying prisons, similar to the Mariel boat lift.
Exactly. And I was at Homestead Air Force Base in 1962.
Wow. Thank you for your service.
No, I mean, that's my dad's service.
Oh, you were there living with your dad. Okay.
He was a pilot. Yeah, my dad's a pilot. And this is where we betrayed the Cubans, by the way. They were sending missiles to Cuba, and they were setting them up. And they spotted them from a U-2 plane. And what happened then was, all of a sudden, everything changed. We find out later, Kennedy and Khrushchev made a deal. We'll take the missiles out of Cuba if you guys promise not to invade Cuba and overthrow the communist regime. So basically, Kennedy sold out the Cuban people. But that's not the only time that he's done that. The other time was Bay of Pigs. Bay of Pigs is where the Batista guys, he was the regime prior to Castro.
Prior to Castro, yeah.
Yeah, and what happened then was all these guys moved to Little Havana in Miami, and they were all itching for a fight. And so the CIA, the Department of Defense, Robert McNamara got together at the White House, and they made this grand scheme where they called themselves Alpha 66. These were the Cuban freedom fighters who were once Batista troopers. They went ashore, they stormed the beach, I think it was west of Havana, and they were supposed to get American air support. But at the very last minute, we've got Robert McNamara says to Kennedy, whispers in his ear, like, listen, we're making a big mistake. We can't go through with this. So they renege on the air support, and all of these Alpha 66 guys are stuck on the beach, and Castro's people come in, and they surround them, and they take them all prisoner, and they put them in this dungeon that was built by the Spanish several hundred years ago.
Wow.
And Castro made a deal with Kennedy. Listen, he said, I'm going to ask you to give us thousands of agricultural heavy equipment in general, thousands of gallons of diesel fuel. And basically what happened was Kennedy basically reinvigorated the Cuban agriculture by having them retire their mules, and now they've got international harvester equipment. The guys who were from Alpha 66 were really very upset with Kennedy. You know, let's put it this way, Alpha 66 and El Presidente de los Estados Unidos, Jack Kennedy, were no longer grand amigos.
Yeah.
He couldn't stand these. I mean, actually, this is what happened.
Well, this plays out like a novel. And I appreciate it. I wish I could sit here and listen to the whole thing. But I get your point that your opinion is that Kennedy sold out the Cuban people twice. And this is, in many ways, how foreign policy, there's always going to be a winner and a loser. And, you know, if you look at history long enough, at least from my perspective, I look at this and I think Iran-Iraq war, this gives us bin Laden and a bunch of other groups, right? And we arm them and we train them and we create them in many ways. We take something that's small, maybe a smoldering ember, and we turn it into a flame. And then that flame comes and bites us in the butt. And perhaps at the same handlers that trained them, right? Because then you start to get to these internal conflicts. People that were once in charge, CIA guys that are no longer in the CIA, they're retired, but they want power, and they're operating as, black ops people now, and they're pulling certain strings, and they get people to do things. And it's just a fascinating chessboard of moves that we are watching. And this one is no different. And I wish somebody close to Kennedy or Kennedy himself was alive to really tell what he knew. But clearly he was silenced so that he wouldn't ever tell what he knew and wouldn't take action on the things that he was planning on doing. So it's always an interesting thing when it comes to Kennedy and the outcomes of his decisions. Bob in Charleston, West Virginia, thank you for your call on the History Lesson WCHS. Folks, we're coming right back. I'm Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our discussion with our callers. We always have some late night favorites, and I love that because, I like having conversations with people, especially, our regulars that call in. And one of them is Diane from Chicago on WGN. Fantastic station, by the way. Diane, welcome back.
Hi, Rich. Thank you. I was just going to mention I had missed that RFK. I didn't call in on that, but it was good that you had him on. And I think Americans like a good conspiracy theory. I think everybody's got views.
Oh, yeah.
I think the founders probably have their own conspiracy theories. But with this guy talking about something called Alpha 66, well, interesting compared to news today, you notice John Kennedy did not,
RFK Jr.?
They didn't get killed and slaughtered. So there's that resentment from that certain element that thinks he was betraying their in Bay of Pigs and also with the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Kennedy had a mind of his own, even though I'm not a Democrat. So RFK would probably agree with that type of leadership. In other words, these foreign wars, we have too much of this collateral, terrible stuff happening. I mean, like deaths are nothing. You know what I mean? This is not right.
Yeah, listen, I'm with you. I'm of both minds here. I agree that when you get too involved in too many things, you make a lot of problems from the position of United States foreign policy. I also realize that the United States is in a very unique position. At least this is my view. I don't believe we can ever really be isolationists. I have this argument with my brother all the time. And I go to breakfast with my brother about once a week. And we always get into this, and I always tell him, look, at some point you have to assume the responsibility that you are the guy that's 7.5 feet tall and 300 pounds of muscle. And there is an elderly woman getting robbed in front of you. And what are you going to do? Say, I don't get involved in foreign wars. I don't get involved in old ladies getting attacked. You have to in many ways because you're the only one that can. Now, it's not just from the position of altruism, in my opinion, Diane. It's also from the position of what we do in our politics by definition, right? Politics is influencing the balance of power and trying to amass this power. If we want to be strong in the world, then we need to be strong in the world. And we have to have the backs of those that might have our back. And you have to cut deals and help people from despots that may be coming after them, or even economically. Some might say, oh, you know what, we're dying over here. We need to make some money. You got to help us make some money so that we can, do whatever we can do to help you, right? So one hand washes the other, both hands wash the face. The mother's milk of politics is money, whether it's in the form of campaign donations or what we like to call foreign aid. That's why we created this whole clearinghouse for this money called the United Nations. And it's literally how it works. We pay certain people off. We threaten others with bombs. And the third scenario, we actually go and bomb them. And I believe that is a necessary cost of doing business when you're a superpower like the United States. Whether you agree with it or not, it's tough because, it might not be what I would like to do, but it's definitely the hand we've been dealt. That's why we have bases everywhere, right? Because we're showing influence in these places, and certain countries say, you know what, we can make money off of you. Let me rent you some space because we have space that we could give you for a base, and you want to be very close to X, Y, and Z country so that they never act up. And what do we do by all that? We protect our fiat currency. All right, we have currency that's not backed by gold and isn't worth much, but it is because of our whole, I'm going to call it a scam or a racket with selling T-bonds, right, treasury bonds. And it's a very interesting, unique, and I'm going to say fragile system that still rules the roost. The American dollar is still the default currency because it's in many ways, I guess, backed by petroleum, if you will, by gasoline, by oil. And that's not official. That's unofficial, right? The petrodollar. But this is how we move. It backs up all of that trade. And that's why the dollar still has strength. And thank God the dollar still has strength, because the minute that it really doesn't have any strength, A, we're in a financial shambles, and B, everybody that's our enemy will come out of the woodwork because we won't have any power anymore. And I think that's a dangerous place for us to be, Diane.
Well, leadership was done by Kennedy in a peaceful way.
Yeah, I'm not saying it wasn't. I just think look at what happens, right? When you take that approach, you end up getting shot because there's a whole mess that we're involved in, and ultimately, I don't think one bad guy can do that. And this is why I always tip my hat to Trump. And I think Trump did a really good job in managing this. He was not one for the foreign wars, and he said we're going to get out of Afghanistan. He did not want to get into more conflict. We did not get into more conflict, and he started to create peace in the Middle East. But at the same time, he made sure we spent $700 billion on the military-industrial complex, making sure they got their piece of the pie so that they were satisfied. Again, a political calculation, because without that, we'd be in a standoff with them, just like Kennedy was. Diane, I got to go. They're chirping in my ear. I'm coming right back. We got calls from Pittsburgh, Idaho, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, it's the speed round with minutes to go. Let's go to Paul, Boise, Idaho, KBOI. Very quickly, sir.
Thanks for taking my call, yeah. Well, I was thinking about the 4 ships down there, the Russians. They're on a search and record, not search and destroy. And they're just trying to get more information as they can for future use if necessary. And that's kind of how I feel about that. I haven't got to see the new frigate they were talking about. I thought that'd be interesting. But if you want to see that stuff, you can see it in Jane's fighting ships, which would probably be on your telephone if you wanted to look it up. And cool. Just interesting. Yeah, you don't expect them to come this close to our shores, but there they are. You know,
I remember, I don't know, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, they were off the coast of Georgia, I believe, or the coast of Florida on some exercise, and they were like, oh, no, we didn't go in. We were still in international waters. But same thing, Russian ships. So this isn't the first time. I mean, this is the first time they're being that brazen and, you know, anchoring in Cuba, but not the first time that they've, you know, definitely, thumbed their nose at the United States and Joe Biden. Paul, thank you for your call. Shout to KBOI and Brody in Pittsburgh. The music means I got to go, but hang in there, brother. As long as you hear my voice on the radio station KDKA at night, you keep listening and getting people to listen, and we're going to get through this together. Folks, until the next time, hasta la próxima. Take care, good night, and God bless. I will return tomorrow, God willing. Until then, don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.